Well, sorry for the delay in getting this one up. It was Easter, and I've also been marking all of your posts all across Australia, and that's over 300 of them, so not quite halfway at this stage, but making good progress. It was a very busy Easter for me. Anyway, let's just take in some of the main points of the fourth lecture. We're talking about something of what we talked about in the last lecture, and that is to do with motivation, but actually taking it a step further and looking at the how that can be applied in the workplace, as applied performance practices. I'll just zoom through to the beginning. So really, when we're talking about money, which is obviously the main, most prominent motivator when it comes to work, which is really what we're about in organisational behaviour. What does money really do, and what does it really mean to us? Of course, it acts as a symbol, and we'll be talking about how the degree to which the kind of salary you get, whether it's a six-figure sum, for example, what does that symbolise to yourself and to your peers and to the job market about a job? So it has some kind of symbolic status. It acts, of course, as a reinforcement. Presumably, the more you reward something, the more people do it. And we talked about that last week. And it acts as some kind of measure of performance within the workplace. You can actually look at bonus systems and accurately kind of gauge what kind of performance a person has been achieving. And finally, it keeps the wolves from the door, so to speak, to use an English expression. So it acts as a soother and an anti-anxiety marker. Everything's going okay, and it enables you, of course, to literally keep the wolves at bay, have a fence around your house, food on the plate, and get an education like you're getting here at CQU. All right, the types of rewards that you can the types of areas where you can reward within the workplace can include, seniority, which basically refers to the degree to which the length of time you've spent in a job. You can also reward with seniority, as in higher level positions within an organisation. Job status, for example, can also be an area that, there's certain prestige jobs within, for example, computer programming, such as, the guys who do the graphic design, or the guys who do the hard coding as opposed to just editing and tidying up, or sales, for example, in computer software. You can also reward competencies, which is particular skills. And you can also reward task performance, which in this case, the degree to which you carry out those particular skills. Now, when a company rewards seniority, that is, when a company rewards how long you stay in a job, so if you've been in a job for 15 years, you get more pay than if you've been in there for 10 years, it does tend to attract more job applicants. People tend to stick at the job longer, but it does have a dampening effect on performance within the workplace, because people just look upon it as an endurance test. The longer I hang out here, the more successful I will be. And poorer performers might justifiably think, well, I'm just going to cling on to the job in the hope that I'll be rewarded through seniority. So that's not exactly a good way to motivate in that sense. This issue of status, it does tend to motivate competition between staff as a method of rewarding, and it can be linked successfully with equity-related performance management. But status-type rewards can also encourage bureaucratic hierarchy and lead to a kind of sluggish results within an organisation, and of course reinforce status mentality and competition rather than collaboration. Competency-based rewards, where pay tends to increase when you get certain skills, can create a highly trained workforce and motivated to get training, gain skills, but it can obviously on the negative side, increased training costs. And there's also can be this kind of slavish pursuit of tickets that you can see. For example, it's not uncommon in the mining industry to keep hunting more tickets, because the more tickets you have, the more rewards you get. This is an example of competency-based rewards. And it does tend to, on the positive side, be associated with more skill and effort applied in the workplace. So it's a good thing in that sense. So task performance, there are a number of different ways that you can reward performance in this sense. That includes, and there's positives and negatives of all these things, organisational rewards such as profit sharing, giving out shares within the company, that's employee shareholding, stock options. These are some of the most common ones. They do help foster a sense of ownership within the firm, and they also have this nice ability to be regulated. When a company's doing well, you can give away shares, and create without actually taking the risk that at a moment when you are in a tight spot, you're giving away too much of the company's fat or profit. Really, just to explain that a little bit more clearly, these organisational rewards, such as profit sharing, employee shareholdings, they tend to be matched to ability to pay. Whereas wages, once you set a wage, it's very hard, but not unheard of, to cut wages back when things go badly. These other things, they rise and fall as the company's performance rises and falls. It does tend to weaken the connection, however, between individual effort and reward. So if people will start to think, so if we're talking about expectancy theory, the people's sense of the PO expectancy, performance outcome expectancy, is weakened. And again, to explain this simply, if you're in a group and the group performs well, the company performs well, and you get rewards at a group level, all's great. But what if you're in a poor performing group and it's very hard for you to be motivated, because no matter how hard you perform individually, the group's going to perform fairly poorly, and subsequently the group rewards are going to be fairly low. So it weakens that nexus between those performance and outcome. And the reality is that you as an individual, even if you're in a well-performing group and everybody's pulling together in a very good team effort, you can't control the economy, for example, or other factors outside the organisation. If you do get a chance, have a look at a couple of examples of employee share ownership plans. Have a look, for example, at Der Spiegel, which is in my former industry, publishing. This is an incredibly successful magazine in an incredibly competitive industry, which is newspaper or magazine industry, where companies are folding. Big famous brands such as News of the World are being destroyed by a number of factors, but most importantly a shrinking market for this kind of product. But Der Spiegel has thrived, and part of the reason it's thrived is because it has an incredibly engaged workforce, and part of the reason it has that incredibly engaged workforce is because it listens to its workforce. And because the reason it listens to its workforce is because the workforce now owns fully half of the company. And so the people who put out the product run the company and are engaged. They're journalists, they're passionate about the product they sell. And it is an extraordinarily good magazine and an extraordinarily successful one. So it's a great example of employee share ownership plans. And there's plenty of bad examples, by the way. Now, individual rewards is the other way to go, and you can include, again, with this ability to pay is linked here. So when the company does well, the company can pay out these rewards. They can include bonuses, commission, and piece rate type of rewards. Piece rate is where, if you produce 50, you get $50. If you produce 70, you get $70. For each piece that you produce, you get some kind of fixed reward. It is important, if you're going to use this kind of reward, to link the rewards, ensure that the rewards are relevant and they are linked to particularly individual desires. So no point giving people, chocolates as reward if they're on a diet, for example. Particularly post-Easter, most of us are. Rewards can also, these kind of individual rewards, you need to be extremely careful that you focus them and hone them so that they lead to a whole set of outcomes, a whole set of bottom lines for your company that are desirable. There's some examples in the textbook of the frozen food insect one, where this company encouraged people to pick, to find insects that had got into the frozen peas. But then people started to, as a result, bring insects to work to put in the peas so that they could get the bonuses for finding the insects. So commonly, individual rewards do have unintended consequences on quality and innovation and safety. So health and safety and individual employee safety tend to be damaged by not carefully linking rewards to quantity outputs, such as with piece rate. So you need to ensure that your rewards are linked to multiple bottom lines: safety, quality, innovation, and quantity, if quantity is the primary driving reason why you want to have these individual reward systems. And then you can bring it down to these kind of team rewards, and that can again be team bonuses calculated on a unit level or a smaller team level. And it can also be based on not just productivity, but cost savings or productivity improvements. And they do tend to work well when the team is a team. And this issue of interdependence is quite important. Not much point rewarding at a team level if you can't get some kind of team synergies going. And you see, what we're trying to do here is drill into you this issue that when you're designing reward systems, think about the implications. Just don't blindly reward. Rewards, particularly money rewards, are a little bit like cigarettes or drugs, heroin. They can produce fantastic responses in people, but those responses can become addictive, and we can develop a tolerance for them, just like we develop a tolerance for drugs, and they can have side effects like drugs can have side effects. So unwise use of bonuses, financial reward, as we've sort of been hammering on last week and again in this lecture, they can have unintended side effects. You need to be aware of them, and you need to tailor these kind of use of rewards very carefully. Okay, so that kind of brings up this issue of job design, and you need to have a look at these issues of interdependency. You have to make sure that the right people are doing the right jobs, and that their roles are precisely mapped, and the rewards are precisely mapped to different elements of the task. You need to create jobs in this process of specialisation that are small enough to be efficient, because as we've talked about previously in this issue where we talked about Taylorism, in order to become highly productive at something, we almost need to bring big jobs down. Even study, for example, when I'm doing essay writing, and I have to write essays as well for my work, for my research work, what I tend to do is at the first process, I try and find the search terms for a particular essay that I'm doing. Once I've settled that I've got the search terms right, then on an industrial level, I'll start downloading paper after paper rhythmically from Google Scholar or from other sources until I've got what I feel is enough quantity of papers, and then I'll start reading the papers very quickly and referencing. I break the task down into small tasks, and I do it repetitively in order to build up speed, because I really think about research work, or in your case study work, in that kind of mechanistic industrial sense, because I do come from a manufacturing background. But the key task is to create jobs that are small enough to still be efficient, but large enough to still be meaningful and challenging and motivating, or you'll find that people fall asleep at the work and quality tends to suffer. So the great thing about specialisation is that even you can train a monkey to do a particularly complex task. If you break it down to a small enough task, it tends to make you better at it, and there's less time wasted between swapping between tasks. So that's Taylorism we did talk about previously and probably will talk about again. And we need to remember when we're doing this kind of thing that, as I've said, that there are multiple causes of motivation and money's not high on the list. Have a quick look in the textbook at hygiene theory from this guy called Herzberg. I'm not a particularly big fan of it, but it's one of those little things that are handy to learn with a view to potentially the exam. A much better model is this job characteristics model, again something that you want to have a quick look at. And it includes pretty comprehensively a number of these aspects of the job that you need to keep in mind. Skill variety, for example, ensuring that there is sufficient skill variety to keep people engaged, but not so great variety that they can't do these jobs well. This sense of task identity. Are you simply turning one nut onto a wheel at work, or are you simply pulling a lever all day, or is there some bigger sense of what you're doing? I'm creating hospital equipment, I'm building a car, and is that task significant impact onto the whole of society? Am I saving lives, or am I just creating profit for the boss? This issue of feedback, the value of the amount of instant or timely feedback that you get from the job, and the issue of responsibility. You have these job characteristics, and out of them come these important critical psychological states such as sense of meaning, sense of responsibility, sense of awareness about where this is all heading and what the results of one's work are. I mean, if you're making pizzas and then you deliver them through a tiny slot and you never see them again, you never see whether the customers are happy or not happy, whether the customers are a smile on the face or are cleaning their plates or leaving half the pizza on the plate. If you don't get this knowledge of the outcome of your work, it is a problem in terms of psychological state of you as an employee, and it relates to your performance, your degree to which you're motivated, degree to which you're satisfied, and degree to which you can do work successfully. Ultimately, there's another level of outcomes, of course, that relate to things like productivity, profitability, and staff turnover, the big three when it comes to, and then there's others like safety at work and quality at work. We've got all these primary and secondary outcomes that can be incorporated into this general job characteristics model. So spend a bit of time on that one. It's definitely worthwhile and definitely practical. We've talked about the risks of job specialisation in terms of meaninglessness if you shrink it too much, and also I will say the positive side of job specialisation. If you make a job simple enough and small enough, you can actually apply these risky heroin type rewards of money on a piecework rate with very few risks. If the job is small and simple enough, and the more rewards you give, the more greater productivity with very few risks. But remember, that's shrinking the job to a level where humans kind of hate the job, and so you will suffer in terms of staff turnover unless the pay is good. But one of the risks of specialisation that can't be addressed easily is this issue of muscular strain from doing the same task. Even if it is downloading PDFs, you get sore eyes from staring intently at the screen, as you'll probably have noticed. But if you rotate jobs, you can deal with this issue. If you multi-skill the workforce, you can reduce boredom and keep people engaged and motivated. So there's this issue that the textbook talks about of job enlargement, where the job grows and more tasks get involved with your particular task or job role. And the textbook talks about the traditional versus modern journalists. Journalists are now expected to produce to the web as well as to print. They're expected to be good at holding a camera and recording video content, not just written content. And the academic role, in the 1930s it involved talking to one or two students, holding one or two lectures a year and drinking lots of sherry. Big difference to what we're up to now at university, I can tell you. All right. Job enrichment involves enriching the job, as kind of the term suggests. So adding greater responsibility, adding greater awareness of where the job is heading, and also giving a greater sense of meaning to a job. These are tasks that can improve psychological states at work. Another aspect of job enrichment which is worth looking at is cluster elements of jobs into a kind of natural group that makes people more aware of what it is they're doing, create meaning. So if people are just involved with polishing one little part of a bonnet, give them a sense of getting them to polish the whole car, so to speak. I mean, that's just a very, very simple example so that they can see, look what I'm doing. I'm creating, again, I'm polishing a car, I'm creating the final look of this product. And another great tip to managers is to give employees contact with clients. Now, very often, people who are designers or manufacturers, or work on the manufacturing floor, for example, have very little contact with clients, have very little opportunity to hear complaints or see the grateful smiles on their faces. And this is something you as a manager can do: is bring clients and that grassroots level staff together. You'll find that this has remarkable effects in terms of improving staff morale, and also clients love it, in my experience. That they love to, there's a certain kind of client that loves to get their fingers dirty, to get their hands, to actually go and see how the product gets made, or even if we're talking about a service-related product, that greater engagement of the client creates greater commitment from clients. It's a form of empowerment, I guess, of the client. I think we can skip this fairly safely. I mean, it's worth, when I do skip things in this, it is worth remembering that it's definitely worth reading the whole of each textbook, but I'm focusing on some of the things I really want to illuminate, particularly about the chapter. Now, self-leadership is one of those things that I like to emphasise, partly because it's not just good from a theoretical perspective, but this stuff is really good out there in your life as a future manager or a future line manager in a company, either your own or someone else's. Self-leadership is the process of influencing oneself to establish a sense of where you're going, and a sense of why you're doing it, and a sense of motivation to do it, to perform tasks either within your own or other people's companies. And this relatively new area does include, as you can kind of imagine, elements from sports psychology, elements from the science of goal setting, and elements from social learning theory. Social learning theory, by the way, relates to the learning you do from just observing other people doing it, kind of vicarious learning. Now, I just, in terms of goal setting and self-leadership, remember it's very much the same as what we talked about last week in terms of goal setting. Set specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-framed, exciting, and reviewed or feedback or audited goals. And it involves a number of different factors which the textbook does talk about, but things like constructive thought patterns and positive self-talk. I'm not a huge fan of this particular area within psychology of, you are wonderful, whispering that to yourself 50 times a day, or I am the most gorgeous man on the planet. That kind of positive self-talk. I've got, there is, as you'll find if you delve a little bit into it, there's positives and negatives there. But I do like some of the other suggestions that the textbook makes about designing natural rewards within the organisation. So either rethinking elements of your work so that you get little bursts of satisfaction out of particular tasks at appropriate times in order to make it more motivating or enjoyable. And one of those bursts can become from this issue of self-monitoring. People differ in this regard. People differ in the regard to which they need these kind of rewards. Some people are quite happy just to power through the day with their iPhone buds in their ears and They don't need any feedback from the work. They'll do a decent job from doing it. But there's other people, and myself included, who are kind of obsessed. As I work my way through all your marking, for example, I'm keeping a tally of how many I've done. What percentage have I of you guys topics that you've posted have I finished? I need that feedback. My late wife was very much the opposite. I remember her going to work, and she was working in a distribution centre many years ago, loading pallets, etc. Quite hard work. And I kept asking, well, how far are you through it? And she'd look at me blankly. I don't know. We'll finish when we finish. And that was her attitude to it. It was quite infuriating for me because I was really keen to know, and she was completely disinterested in this aspect of self-monitoring. And self-reinforcement, again, is this opportunities, similar to designing natural rewards, to create feedback opportunities within a workplace. Now, these goals which you create yourself are more engaging, and they do tend to lead to better performance. Now, there's some contingencies in relation to self-leadership. People who are conscientious and extroverted tend to respond better to self-leadership skills, and those people who feel good about themselves and have an internal locus of control or internal sense of control. In terms of organisational factors, so organisational level variables, that includes, the jobs need to have some kind of degree of autonomy, because if you're micromanaged, it hardly applies. There needs to be a participative leadership, and also this measurement-orientated culture in order for self-leadership skills to be effective, improving performance. This area of research, by the way, is not particularly well developed, and some of this stuff is, some of these contingencies have been almost like suggested on the basis of logic rather than really good quality research. And you'll realise by the time I send back the topics to you that I'm a big fan, and I'm not exactly hiding it, of good quality research and real evidence, as opposed to just armchair evidence or just because someone says so. Anyway, we've finished before the 30-minute mark. I will try and get your essays back to you very soon, and that should be, it's now Tuesday. I'm hoping by the end of the week, but that's kind of unlikely. But certainly by the end of next week. So I will manage to do all of them I promise, within the 14 days, and certainly before you have to do any further submissions. Right, hope you had a great Easter, and I'll get this up online for you.